for Azeroth!
Heyo, folks, Untitled here, and welcome to, well, World of Warcraft patch 7.0 pre-Legion patch that has been launched since, well, since yesterday. I tried it before, it didn't work out so well. So what am I gonna do with this little video? Well, the basic premise is very simple. Since now that the patch has been brought out, of course, we all know the class changes and of course all the upcoming stuff. They've got some work, of course, that all builds up to the invasion that we're going to be fighting, of course. But most importantly, combat has been going for a few changes, particularly animation designs, sound, and, well, some of the abilities. A lot of ability tuning has been done with some of the classes and specializations, particularly talents and specializations in general have been revamped once again. I'm actually a big fan of it because things have changed in a direction that I thoroughly enjoy. So what do we got here? Well, I'm going to show off some of the combat, new sort of combat animations that they've created, as well as what the new talents do, as well as their functionality. Now, as you can see, I'm showing Protection Paladin at the moment. I will go through the other ones as quickly as I can. Mostly it will just be Retribution, and I'll see if I can get over a span time of certain-ish time. I will see if I can get the other classes, and one or two of their specialization will be shown. I will not be showing all of them because I cannot show you at full detail because I'm not an expert at it. Hey, if you got a problem with it, take it up with my lawyer, would you? Anywho, so they've revamped some of the classes and specialization, but most of all what they have done is apparently they've redesigned animations and spell effects for certain classes, both range and melee. Melee have given a sweet new animation design for some of their melee attacks. Right now, let's see, so I'm going to show the basic premise here. As you can expect, you still have the three basic ones that we're all familiar with. You got Crusaders, you got Judgment, Avenger Shield, which looks absolutely amazing right now. So, as you can see, it doesn't bounce, there's a reach, but I'll get to that later. You can see it all looks way more fluid and much more dynamic. And the melee combat even got better. I mean, this sort of melee design, now this one may be old-fashioned, but some of the other ones, like for example, that one is new. And if you look at Consecration, look at that texture effect. And the animation is done so well. So, that's all that. As you can see, some of the other things as well. As you can hear, some of the sounds have also changed. And some of the animations actually work much more better with this kind of play. Because I think these animations, it's always been considered, of course, as a sort of secondary to some people. They prefer, of course, mechanical. But I think it's very important that animations feel lifelike and realistic in a certain way. Like, it doesn't need to be like realistic in realism as in its effect, but more as in its representation. And it's done very well. Now, we've got, of course, new abilities, but... So, they brought out some old, threw out some old, brought back some old, and threw in a few new ones. Now, most of them are still pretty standard, as I said. You got Justice, Avenger Shield, Hammer Righteous, which is just the Protection Paladin's version of Precision Strike. You got Consecration. It's still pretty much there. And, of course, you've also got a few... Some of the old ones have returned. One thing that has disappeared, that was disappeared during Warlords, makes its return, which is Avenging Wrath. I mean, that's pretty sweet that they brought that back. I don't know exactly what all of a sudden Pull decided them to bring it back, but I kind of like it. They've also added a new ability, which is standard for Protection Paladin, which is called Divine Steed. It is basically the speed boost for the Paladin because they've always lacked it. It used to be, of course, in the first tier of the talents, but that was, to be honest, I found kind of myself thought that was kind of loud. And this is a much more fluid and dynamic version. You see, animations are much better designed, and I love it. Now, without further ado, I think it's the most important thing of all to get into one thing in particular. The new talents. Now, the talents have gone through, all of them have gone through quite a few changes. You might still find some similarities in some of the other specializations in their classes. Now, let's get through them real quick. Now, I'm going to, of course, show the effects, but also their animation. Some of them haven't really lost it, so I can just, skip those. Let's start with, of course, the level 15. Now, two of these are pretty much the same, so I can't really show them all. The first one is called Holy Shield, which is basically the one that we got at level 100. I think it was back when Warlords. It's been a while since I've played, so at least with my Paladin. So that's still pretty much the same. It increases your block chance by 10%, allows you to block spells, and your successful blocks deal damage back to the enemy. I like this talent, but they've also added a few new ones. So Consecrated Hammer is basically, you see some of your abilities have an effect with Consecration, which is basically what they're trying to say. They're changing it all to, they're making, you know, Consecration kind of part of the course, like part of the kit. But with this, you don't need to rely on the AoE or bonus effects with Consecration for people who just want to have some easier time in AoEing or that sort of thing. Now the newest one they did was Blessed Hammer. So what this does is that it's a new ability that actually works like just another form of AoE. What you do is you press the button and you got a hammer that just spins around and damages enemies nearby. Pretty much reminds me of the Crusader back in Diablo 3, who has a very similar ability to this one. So that's pretty much that. Like I said, nothing really new in there. So that's pretty much that. I like the ability, but I'm not completely sure if I'm a big fan of it. I mean, sure, you got more AoE, but is it really necessary? I mean, to be honest, Paladins have that in a big advantage already. I don't know if they really need more. So I'm gonna just leave it at that. So let's get to the next one, which is First Avenger. This was basically used to be a major glyph. I don't understand why they turned it into a talent, but that's pretty much because they've of course removed the, well, glyphs, the major glyph system. Kind of sad about that whole thing, but hey, what are you gonna do about it? First Avenger basically increases the damage of your Avenger's shield. Also, apparently, because there are certain abilities that decrease the, for example, let's see, and increases the chance of its remaining cooldown to be reset in abilities and talents. So basically, the cooldown reset is increased by 50%, so a bigger chance of getting Avenger's shield, but like I said, it only strikes one target. This is pretty good, I guess, if you just go for solo boss, but to be honest, I never really considered Avenger Shield as a sort of primary damage tool. It does a pretty significant damage, particularly now, of course, but even with even in its traditional state, it did pretty good damage. Now, the next one is, of course, Crusaders Judgment. I am not going to show because this one actually kind of doesn't have any sort of fit to build to show, which is basically Judgment can also trigger Grand Crusader. Like I said, Grand Crusader gives me a chance to allow me to use well, Avenger Shield because it immediately triggers its cooldown to be reset, so nothing special there. Last but not least, and this is the only one that is actually inactive, is Bastion of Light. Now, I like this one because it really works in the tanking idea. What it basically does is, for example, if I'm in a tough fight and I started, you know, out of sheer panic, I pop out all my Shield of the Righteous. I'm like, oh crap, this is a bad thing to have. So what you do, you pop this, bam, you got 3 of these again. And you can either use this for some extra burst damage, though I wouldn't recommend it, but it also works, of course, fantastic as a damage reduction effect. Apparently, as I have found out, I need to test this out again, but it seems that the duration can actually be built up. That's actually a pretty sweet thing to find out. This might actually be a bug, but we'll find out eventually. Anyway, that's basically the level 30 talents. Next up, we've got the level 45. These are basically pretty still. This is all on the CC level mostly. So you got Fist of Justice. It used to be that it just decreased its cooldown and increased the range of Hammer of Justice. Now it's been changed that that Judgment reduces the remaining cooldown on Hammer of Justice. Pretty good if you need constant CC. In raiding, I can imagine that working in against mobs. Like if you need a tank swap that requires you to switch between a mob and the boss. But on bosses themselves, it's pretty much, you know, useless because it just doesn't work. I do like the new animation that's created with it. It gives much more of a feeling like, you know, we're really striking with some kind of holy hammer. Now, next up is Repentance. This is a new one. I haven't tried this out. But basically, it is still the same. Like, it's just, you know, the sort of CC you can expect. But now it actually apparently does damage to enemies that are affected by it. I'm not a particular fan of it because CC on this level is usually only done in certain raid fights. So it pretty much has lost its effect. And by that mind. So this one is pretty much probably scratched off by anyone who says you want to build the optimal talent system. And last but not least, and this one is interesting because this used to be pretty big, because this used to be an ability for AoE CC only, which is Blinding Light. Now Blinding Light is still holds on to some of it. It's an AoE blind, but now actually adds damage to its effect. So, and apparently non-holy damage also this will break the disorient effect. I do like the idea of this ability because it does some pretty good effect. Apparently physical damage probably also counts to it, so it's mostly just meant for AoE CC. I can actually see this being used in both an PvE and PvP setting, so I actually think that that could work out pretty well. Now the next two, I've got some reservations on the next few talents. In every tier there are a few that I'm just raising my eyebrow about. I think it's just a PvP thing, but I could be wrong. They might have some ideas that might work with this, with some of these talents. But without further ado, let's get to the level 60. Now level 60 actually has changed. Now, we're all familiar with the blessings. They still held on to the Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Sacrifice, and what used to be Blessing of Protection. They've changed that a little bit, and I'll get to that in a minute. Now, so let's get to the other ones. Now we've got, of course, Retribution Aura, which is the return of it, because this has been gone for quite a few years now, I'd say. Now Retribution comes back, but it's actually been nerfed in a way. It's returned but nerfed because this only counts to non-tanking raid members. This, I can see this being used in a PvP setting because you see some tanks rolling, but seeing this working in raids, I pretty much don't see the point in it because, great, how's this gonna work for you? So I just don't get the big deal about this because this isn't working in PvE, because in in raiding particularly, boss fights, there's not even ads are usually meant to be picked up by the by the mobs. So I don't see the point of this because they're not supposed to be picked up by damage dealers or healers. So I just don't see the point, no matter, because it only acts on physical attacks, melee attacks. Now, usually any ad that actually attacks random enemies usually don't use melee attacks. So I just don't see the point in this. Blessing of Salvation returns once again. This pretty much stays the same. It's basically the threat removal and threat reducer for the targeted party members, so I don't have to show that off. Blessing of Spell Warding, though, this one I can see being used for tanks, for ourselves actually, because basically what it gives, it's an anti-magic shell, but only works on a, it's an anti-magic shield, but only works against, but it's on a time limit rather than a damage limit. So you pop this in a, when the heavy magic damage comes in, and you are safe and sound for quite a while. And you can even use this on allies, so this is actually pretty good if you have to. I'm usually not so good at targeting other party or raid members during that fight, but I can imagine this being used pretty good. At least from a tanking perspective, I'm really lousy at it. Now, next up on the list is the level 75 talents, which consists of these three, and to be honest, in a way, they're, I could say, kind of all over the place, but it's not necessarily on a bad front, that is. So we'll go through them real quick. So Final Stand is a passive which causes that apparently when you use Divine Shield, you taunt everybody within range. Now, as far as I understand, taunting still exists, but and it apparently now comes with a shout. But I don't see the point in this if if you're shielding. I mean, usually you're not supposed to gain any more threat while this is active. That's not just as when you activate it, but in general. So this one got me a little confused. I guess there is a point to it, but I just don't see it. I guess there is maybe some use in PvE. I just don't see it. Now, next up is Knight Templar. Now, this one is pretty self-explanatory. I don't even have to show it off. I already showed the Divine Steed, so as you can see, it's the same. So it basically is a speed boost. Then with this, though, this might actually find some, actually during fights, besides, of course, using an extra speed boost, which is that it reduces its cooldown by 50%, and it reduces all damage while you're mounted by 20%. This isn't actually so bad, because it's so, you can not only have a speed boost, but you can also rush through maybe some heavier damage, and you can reduce it, so really leaving some stress from your healers, and that's pretty sweet, to be honest. Now, next up, and this one, I'm still maybe swinging towards Knight Templar. I'm just going to show off. Right now, the new healing for the Paladin that you can use in an instant is Light of the Protector, which works like this. Like, calls down the light to heal you for a percentage, for at the moment like a quarter of your missing health, and it gets even more stronger when you're standing in your consecration. So when you get in some really nice shape, you activate this, and boom, you got a whole bunch of health back. Did this, but it's actually only used as a, it's meant as a personal heal. You can't use this on allies. With Hand of the Protector, apparently they decrease the cooldown, and you can actually use it for allies. Now, as far as I do find a drawback in it, as in that the consecration effect is lost from it, so you don't actually gain an increased healing boost when using this with your consecration. Now, the idea of healing another guy seems good, but again, for someone of my playstyle, I'm not good at that. I'm very bad at targeting. I'm not good at the key binding system for then targeting the proper party member during that whole mess. So I'm actually winging more towards this because this could actually help out pretty good. Now the last one is going to be a little bit more tricky because they're actually, well, kind of tricky. So the last ones are, again, just passives. Now the first one we've got is Consecrated Ground. Now this one is interesting. Of course, it's the level 90, so it pretty gets into the big... We're pretty much getting into the big ones here. So again, 2 passives and an active, which is kind of confusing to me on certain levels. Okay, so Consecrated Ground works pretty much like what you could expect if a consecration would ever be thrown into a certain, MOBA that Blizzard has created called Heroes of the Storm, and they ever create a Paladin character that uses this consecration. Basically, it actually just, it still holds on to the same damage, but also allows you to heal allies while they stand in it. Up to 6, of course. They kept or else everybody will just get clustered up. And it reduces the movement speed of enemies by 50%. So this is, I see potential this in PvP, not so much in PvE. So on PvP, I can get this. I mean, if you're in a big situation, you're clustered up with a bunch of groups, and everybody knows, usually PvP fights tend to turn into clusters. We all know that it always turns into just everybody running around. This actually slows them down, so it's easier to get a hold of them, and of course the fact that you're actually helping out your allies by healing them a bit. But in PvE, in raids, I don't actually see this, because usually when you're fighting a boss, nobody else besides usually the other tank is near you, so I don't really see the point in this while you're tanking, or even off tanking. I mean, unless you really need to be in the other group when you're off tanking, I don't really see the use in this ability. So I'm casting this off as a bit of a weird one for, well, anyone. But this one, on the other hand, I do like. Judgment of Lights, which is a pretty sweet one, which is that Judgment now applies an effect to your target that you struck with Judgment. Now what it actually does is that it applies, and anyone who attacks this from your party or raid member, as far as I know, including yourself, actually heals it. Now, I don't know if this just counts only towards you or everybody, but I do enjoy the idea of this little ability being around, because this definitely can help out on quite a few occasions when you need some extra healing. Now, healing from attacks may not seem like much, and it's only like about 1,000, and that's, in this current build, maybe not a lot, but if you start counting that this counts every second, and my melee attacks are not that fast, this works pretty well for both you and your raid. So I can definitely see some use in this. And the last one in the level 90 is the most interesting one, I've got to say, though again very situational, and I could see this more happening as if you would be more of a damaging idea, which is Aegis of Light. Now what does it do? Channels an Aegis of Light that protects you and all allies standing within 10 yards behind you for 6 seconds, reducing all damage taken by 20%. I do love the spell effect here. I'll just show it up right here. As you can, boom! Everybody who stands behind you is pretty much getting some damage reduction. I like it. There's just one little problem I've got with it. Well, actually, 2 problems with it. First of all, you cannot move while you use it. So as soon as you move, because it's considered some sort of strange channeling effect, you can't move while you use this. So if you move even an inch, it's gone. So the damage reduction is gone. So, and second of all, again, this is about the idea that you're then close to either. This is only useful for the other tank. Again, I don't really see the point in this. Again, with the same here, like if you want to make full effectiveness of this, you need to be up in the other people, because if this is just for the other tank, that's not going to make you a lot of friends in raids, trust me. I mean, it may seem you're going to make a friend maybe with the tank, but if you're just using it for one guy, and this thing is on a 5-minute cooldown, by the way, this is pretty long. Consecrated Ground is an even more preferred one because it's just healing. It may not be a damage reduction, but at least this one has only a... It's got a freaking 8-second cooldown. This thing is going to be popping constantly, so I don't really see the point in that one. And last but not least, we've got the level 100 talents, which is Righteous, Protector, Last Defender, and Seraphim. Seraphim will be the last on the list. I dislike the one the most, and it's got a cooldown because it's considered an active effect. This one will be the go-to tool for anyone who just wants to have a good tanking effect. Shield of the Righteous reduces the remaining cooldown on Light of the Protector and Avenging Wrath by 3 seconds. So this this actually adds some extra damage to you, and you can actually heal even quicker whenever you use this, which is definitely a big deal for a lot of us, because increasing, allowing us to heal more quickly, this is considered, of course, a sort of emergency heal, but allowing you to pop it quickly always helps out when, when healers start getting a little low on mana, or, as we all know, shit can sometimes hit the fan, even in the most controlled raid group. So this really works out pretty well for all of us. This one, again, I mostly see this for mob bosses or PvP, because this basically causes that you take reducing damage with the more enemies that are within a certain radius of you. Again, I don't really see the point in this in anything besides PvP, because in boss fights, okay, it's maybe permanent, but and 3%, and it's stacked. Usually with some bosses, I've seen some of the bosses in the upcoming expansion, you usually don't use... You're usually only fighting 2, and sure, that's maybe a 60% damage reduction, but I just don't see the point. Like, it's not something that you're making a good deal of. At a PvP, I can imagine this could be pretty good, considering, of course, they say diminishing returns, so at some point it might be just like a 1% or 0.5% decrease, but I can definitely see some use in this in later considerations for PvP, but in PvE, I just don't see the point of it, and maybe for mob bosses and raids, but I just don't see the point in a, raid encounter in most cases. And the last one, and this one I just don't get, particularly this sort of cost you have to pay for it. If this was just on a cooldown effect and had just a full... I mean, it's already on a 30-second cooldown, and that's pretty long, if I gotta admit, at least for something like this. And that is Seraphim. The Seraphim, anyone who's played the Paladin before knows what this thing does. It basically, it used to work on the Holy Power system, but that's been removed for Protection Paladin, so now what it does is you activate it, and it's actually now sucks up charges from your Shield of the Righteous in order to give you a massive increase on your secondary stats, which is Haste, Critical Strike, Mastery, and Versatility. Sounds great? Maybe. I don't see the point in it because it's only a 750, and this is an indirect effect. I mean, your haste increases so you can do more damage, your critical strike increases so your parry chance does increase, your mastery increases, which helps in a certain way, and versatility increases. But you only have one... If you have 3 charges of Shield of the Righteous and you use this, that's 2 charges right out the window. I don't see the point. It looks nice, although I'm not completely sold to the idea, considering when we get artifact weapons, those things are more flashier than any of this will ever be. I just don't see the point in this thing. It just doesn't get to me. It's just not my kind of cup of tea. It's just not the sort of style I would go for when it comes to when you want to play a proper Paladin tank. It just doesn't work for me. I mean, considering what the others give you, it's a 35% damage decrease, 35% damage reduction. Why would you give that up for some increase in secondary statistics, even if it is... Well, it's big in its numbers, but as for what you need to do as a tank, it's mediocre. It's really mediocre. Trust me, you're not going to win off of it. So I can't really say that I'm a big fan of that one, so I prefer this one. But that's pretty much it on the talent system and most of the abilities. Now, of course, like I said, a lot of things have been changed, but the thing I love the most is just the new spell effects, the new animations, the sounds. I mean, it sounds better, it looks better, and it feels so much more impactful. Everything feels like the animations make much more sense. I mean, look at that. All the animations make much more sense. Everything has an effect. They all have a certain animation to show. Even Guardian of the Ancient Kings has changed quite a bit. And although this is a bit weird, I do love this design, but some of these things are just weird and I just can't see. And some of these talents are strange, but I'm sure that Blizzard thought this over, and although of course Blizzard's going to know to make mistakes, I fully understand some of the choices behind some of these abilities. But particularly, I just love these new design animations. They look fluid, they work well. I mean, look at this. This is pretty amazing, if I have to say so. It just feels fluid, it's active, all the effects just feel much more impactful, and everything just works. Everything, in a way, just makes much more sense. The animations are fluid, and I just enjoy now much. I'm gonna love this stuff because it just basically creates this amazing. Look at it, the effects are so much more detailed, everything looks and feels so much more dynamic and alive and organic. It just works for me. I can get behind these new animation designs, and I'm gonna love these. It's seriously gonna be something I'm really looking forward to it. So that's something that I think is some of the things that isn't considered a main feature, but I still consider one of the more definitely upsides to this expansion. Just these animations are gonna be great. I mean, look at it. It just feels right. And I mean, just look at it. It just feels amazing. And I just can't say that it isn't something I'm looking forward to. So I'm gonna have to say that these spell effects, the animation design, it's all done so flawlessly, and I fully am so glad that that Blizzard decided to do this. And I hope that this continues on even later on. Who knows what they could do with this. Now, that's pretty much for that. I just wanted to show you all that. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'll be making more of some of the other specializations, even for the other classes. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please like the button. Click that like button if you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of these videos. And please help me out any way you can. I hope you guys have enjoyed the video and I find this in some way entertaining and informative. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. And until then, bye-bye!